Welcome to the U-Verify report. In this edition, we look at strict gun control policies and why they have failed everywhere in the world where they have been implemented, including Australia and the United Kingdom. Countries such as Russia, Brazil, Mexico, and Panama have all begun to relax their gun control laws in order to help their local police departments fight violent crime. Governments around the world know that guns in the hands of civilians save hundreds of thousands of lives every year. But why their obsession with trying to ban the statistically insignificant assault rifle? Why countries with fewer mental health issues but similar rates of gun ownership, like Switzerland, still experience less gun-related deaths? Why countries such as China, France, and Germany with strict gun control laws still experience mass murder where the perpetrators typically use a knife or a truck? You may be surprised to know that despite what the mainstream media will have you believe, school shootings, quote, are not a growing epidemic. This is coming from the National Public Radio, NPR, and Washington Post. This and much more in this new episode of the U-Verify report. During my research on gun control and gun violence, I came across a few articles from the mainstream media that contradicts their own narrative. The first article that I have is from National Public Radio, NPR, and it reads, "Despite heightened fear of school shootings, it is not a growing epidemic." The Parkland shooting last month has energized student activists who are angry and frustrated over gun violence. But it's also contributed to the impression that school shootings are a growing epidemic in America. In truth, they are not. I have another article here from the Washington Post. The title is, "School Shootings Are Extraordinarily Rare. Why is fear of them driving policy?" The statistical likelihood of any given public school student being killed by a gun in school on any given day since 1999 is roughly 1 in 614 million. And since the 1990s, shootings at school have been getting less common. The chance of a child being shot and killed in a public school is extraordinarily low. Not zero, no risk is, but it's far lower than many people assume, especially in the glare of heart-wrenching news coverage after an event like Parkland. It is far lower than almost any other mortality risk a kid faces, including traveling to and from school, catching a potentially deadly disease while in school, or suffering a life-threatening sports injury. I have another article here from the Washington Post that reads, "I used to think gun control was the answer. My research told me otherwise." Last year, Lee Libresco at the Washington Post, hardly an organ of the NRA, concluded that gun control measures are of extremely limited value. Quote, "My colleagues and I spent 3 months analyzing all 33,000 lives ended by guns each year in the United States, and I wound up frustrated in a whole new way. We looked at what interventions might have saved those people in the case of the policies I had lobbied for crumbled when I examined the evidence. I researched the strictly tightened gun laws in Britain and Australia and concluded that they didn't prove much about what America's policy should be. Neither nation experienced drops in mass shootings or other gun-related crime that could be attributed to their buybacks and bans. Mass shootings were too rare in Australia for their absence after the buyback program to be clear evidence of progress. And in both Australia and Britain, the gun restrictions had an ambiguous effect on gun-related crimes or death. What Libresco did conclude was that a host of societal issues are driving much of what we hear about in terms of so-called gun violence. Mental illness, suicide, gang violence, domestic violence are all important factors that drive gun violence. The problem, Libresco admits, is that simply prohibiting certain types of guns doesn't really address these issues. There's another article based on a study by the RAND Corporation. It was published by National Public Radio, NPR. The title is, "Overwhelming Majority of Studies Find That Gun Control Policies Don't Work." An analysis of thousands of gun control studies claimed that just 63 of those studies found connection between more stringent gun control laws, violent crime, and suicide reductions. The nonprofit RAND Corporation spent 2 years and $1 million on the analysis, searching for evidence of benefit from gun control policies. RAND's analysis looked to establish connection between gun policies and rates of homicide, suicide, self-defense, gun use, hunting, and other categories. The vast majority of those categories went unaffected by legislation, however, according to NPR. I have another article here from the New York Times. The title is "The Assault Weapon Myth." Over the last 2 decades, the majority of Americans in a country deeply divided over gun control have coalesced behind a single proposition: the sale of assault weapons should be banned. But in the 10 years since the previous ban lapsed, even gun control advocates acknowledge a larger truth. The law that banned the sale of assault weapons from 1994 to 2004 made very little difference. It turns out that big, scary military rifles don't kill the majority of the 11,000 Americans murdered with guns each year. Handguns do. In 2012, only 322 people were murdered with any kind of rifle, FBI data shows. A good source of information is the document titled Firearm Violence from 1993 through 2011, coming from the government. We're going to leave a link to all these articles and government documentation so that you can do your own research later. Firearm-related homicides declined 39% from 18,000 to 11,000 in 2011. From 1993 to 2010, males, black, and persons ages 18 to 24 had the highest rates of firearm homicide. And further proof that gun control policies don't work are the following articles from the mainstream media. This is from Forbes magazine. Nearly 1 million New Yorkers didn't register their assault weapons. Here is another article. This is from Forbes magazine. This one is from the New American. Connecticut gun owners failed to register. Officials push amnesty. After Connecticut enacted one of the most draconian gun control regimes in America, official estimates that the overwhelming majority of the citizens targeted by the latest assault on gun rights failed to comply. Here is another article, actually a study that was funded by the Obama administration. Obama asked the CDC to study the issue of gun-related violence, and the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, outsourced that study to an independent body, in this case the National Academy of Science. The Obama administration funded research into gun violence found that guns in the hands of civilians save about 2.5 million lives each year. The title of the study is, quote, "Priorities for Research to Reduce the Threat of Firearm-Related Violence." Some of the key findings are, number one, armed citizens are less likely to be injured by an attacker. Defensive uses of guns are very common. Number three, mass shootings and accidental firearm deaths account for a small fraction of gun-related deaths, and both are declining. Number four, interventions, that is gun control, such as background checks, so-called assault rifle bans, and gun-free zones, produce mixed results. Number five, gun buyback turning programs are, quote, ineffective in reducing crime. Number six, stolen guns and retail gun show purchases account for very little crime. Number seven, the vast majority of gun-related deaths are not homicides, but suicides. Now the following is a list of countries that have relaxed their gun control laws very recently. The first one is Russia, and I have an article here from mintnews.com that is very, very interesting. The title is "The Fact That Neither Side Wants to Admit About Gun Control." Russia recently relaxed its firearm laws. For the first time in recent memory, a Russian citizen can carry a firearm. The prohibited items speak volumes about what a government's motive behind disarming a population is. Russia has allowed smoothbore long guns, pistols, revolvers, and other firearms, as well as tasers. That's almost everything. What is still banned? Rifles. So the Russian government has made it clear that the real objective is to remove rifles from civilian hands. The reasoning is pretty clear. You need rifles to overthrow a government. I have another article here from National Public Radio, NPR, about Brazil. The title is, Brazil has nearly 60,000 murders and it may relax gun laws. Almost 60,000 people were murdered in Brazil in 2014, most with guns. While some Latin American countries have higher per capita murder rates in absolute numbers, Brazil is the deadliest place in the world outside of Syria. Still, a group of Brazilian congressmen wants to make guns easier to obtain, modeling their proposal on US legislation. Brazil doesn't have a gun problem. It has a problem of illegal guns in the hands of criminals, especially drug traffickers. The argument is one familiar to Americans. If the bad guys have guns, the good guys should be allowed to have guns as well to protect themselves. This is coming from National Public Radio. Another article, in this case from CBS News, about Mexico. The title is, Mexicans have the right to own guns, but few do. Many Mexicans perceive government security forces as unable to do that job, and often actually being in cahoots with the cartels. Since 2013, civilian self-defense militias have sprung up in some rural areas as communities became fed up by corruption, organized crime, and a failure by police and military forces to keep them safe. Panama. More guns equal less crime. Panama lifts ban on gun imports amid rising crime wave. Public Safety Minister Rodolfo Aguilera said the country will follow in the footsteps of the United States and Switzerland, where the right to bear arms is believed to lead to fewer homicides. Everything seems to indicate, I'm quoting, everything seems to indicate that there is no direct correlation in the aphorism that says that more guns mean more crime, said Aguilera, who explained that relaxed gun laws have allowed the United States to reduce the homicide rate over the last 20 years. This is coming from the Panama Post. The following is a list of violent crime from all around the world that the mainstream corporate media won't cover much. I encourage you to go and look at this particular video on YouTube. It's a small short documentary on the situation in Australia, and the data they're using is from Australian mainstream media and local mainstream media. The title of the documentary is Gun Control, a Warning from Australia. Armed robberies up 69%, assault with guns up 28%, gun murders up 19%, and home invasions up 21%. Let's move on to London with very strict gun control policies. They're having a huge problem right now with knife attacks and knife violence. This is coming from the Times of London. London murder rate beats New York as stabbings surge. Another article from the Daily Wire. London's mayor declared intense new knife control policies to stop epidemic of stabbing. The police will now stop and frisk people believed to be carrying knives. So gun control didn't work, now they are moving to ban knives. Maybe next they will ban cars altogether. Another article. Canada's worst mass killing in 30 years proves lunatics who want to kill people don't need guns. Proving the notion that deranged lunatics hell-bent on taking innocent lives will carry out their demented plans with or without guns, Canada's deadliest mass killing in decades was conducted with a van. This is from www.thefreethoughtproject.com. It was also reported by the mainstream media. Here are some headlines from China with extremely tight gun controls. China, knife attackers kills 7 children, wounds 12. USA Today. 33 dead, 130 injured in China knife wielding spree. NBC News. The following is a list of politically incorrect headlines and web links that the mainstream media don't like to advertise very well. The color of gun crime in America's big cities. This is a very interesting compilation of data from the FBI documenting the fact that most of the gun crimes that we see in the United States is concentrated in big cities like Chicago, Baltimore, Los Angeles, New York, etc. And it breaks down by race the percentage of murders in those cities. Here's another article from the Huffington Post. Murder rate for Black Americans is 4 times the national average. Chicago crime rate drops as concealed carry applications surge. This is coming from the Washington Times, and it reads, city sees fewer homicides, robberies, burglaries, car thefts as Illinois residents take arms. Another good article here. Media silent as concealed carrier takes down shooter at South Carolina nightclub. Washington Times. Another article. Uber driver licensed to carry gun shoots gunman in Logan Square. Chicago Tribune. Good Samaritan kills active shooter in Texas sports bar. Police. NBC News. And just a few weeks after the Parkland shooting, and after the liberal mainstream media declared the stupidest idea ever in regards to the idea of arming teachers, we found the following headlines. Attempted armed robber shot by church security guard in West Garfield Park. WGN TV. Ocala, Florida school shooting. School resource officer praised for quick actions. This is from CBS News. Gunman at Maryland High School dies after armed school officer intervenes. 2 others injured. This is from USA Today. Breaking. School shooting was stopped by armed guard. ABC 7 Chicago. We can look at all. There are thousands and thousands of examples of people armed with or that have concealed carry permits, stopping violent crimes, and school shootings being stopped by resource officers and teachers that you never hear from the mainstream media. But the reality of this is that we should look at what the real problem is, and the reality and the facts are that the United States is the most heavily drugged nation on earth. We consume about 20 or 30% of all the antidepressants. We are heavily consuming all sorts of illegal drugs, and we all know that there is serious issues with mental health in this country. So banning certain types of guns have been proven again and again over the entire planet that just following that line of action is not going to work. It needs a comprehensive approach to reduce this horrific problem of gun violence. Maybe we can have metal detectors in school. Maybe we can let teachers that are proficient in the use of firearms carry to school. In other words, maybe repealing the Gun-Free Zone Act of 1990, which clearly has been a disaster because 98% of all mass shootings happen in gun-free zones. And then also, of course, we need to look at mental health issues, people that are suffering from depression and give warning signs that they might do something. So I think the issue with the assault weapon, like the AR-15 or the AK-47, is I think it's not going to solve much. As clearly documented by the FBI, only 300 people were killed with any type of rifle in 2012. So that's a very tiny minority. 80% of mass shootings are carried out with handguns in urban, highly populated urban areas like Chicago, Baltimore, Los Angeles. So we are looking at the wrong approach to deal with this issue. So I hope you find this information useful. We're going to leave a list of all the documentation and all the links and news articles down below in the video description so that you can do your own research and you go ahead and verify and come to your own conclusions. So thank you for being with us today, and have a good day.